last issue that Project 200 is finally driving the way it always should have. But what you didn't see last issue is that the car didn't totally agree. After a day at the track, the car completely lost oil pressure during some fun time and caused some damage to the engine. The engine was put through approximately 10 seconds of full noise with no oil pressure, so I feared the worst. The expected culprit at the time was a failed oil pump, which could be due to multiple reasons. So it was time for the engine to come out again, and this time it would be done once and done right from the experts, Croydon Racing Developments. Jim put some time aside to strip Project 200's engine down personally and assess the damage and work out where to go next. My biggest fear with an oil pump failure was that the head would be damaged, but with the rocker cover removed, I breathed a sigh of relief as the head appeared to be perfectly intact.
Okay, that all looks okay, that looks okay. Mate, you might be in business.
Could be luck.
I think this head looks salvageable to me. I was expecting worse from what you told me.
Jim then removed the valve train, being careful to keep all of the shims, retainers, lifters and rocker arms grouped together to make reassembly easier. With the head removed, we could see that the half-inch head stud conversion Jim performed previously had done its job and the head gasket was perfect. It's also noteworthy that the bores and pistons are still in perfect condition, indicating that the tune in the car was spot on. Jim then removed the balancer and the culprit was found.
Broken. There it is. You can see it inside, the gears. There's bits of gear in there, or collar. It's just absolutely trashed there. You can see it's spun all the way around there. It's actually one of the very, very few SRs I've ever seen break. GDRs, yeah, I've seen them before. But no, there's definitely, for that to happen, there's an issue. I mean, I would have ran a different pump on that anyway. Knowing the motor, and as soon as you put all these bits and pieces in it, you don't run a standard oil pump normally.
Jim then flipped the engine over and removed the sump and oil pump housing. You can see just how bad the damage is.
You can see the gears broken there and there. It's basically destroyed everything. That's the actual gear, which is the reciprocating part of the oil pump. Oil pumps seem to be, as the engines perform more and things rev more, oil pumps definitely are on the suffering list as far as RPM goes. I'm not going to go and point specifically to one thing. I mean, at the end of the day, I could pull a pump apart, get the material analysed and find out whether there was a flaw in the material to start off with, whether the pump was really old and hasn't been replaced for as old as the engine or the car is. But a combination of narrow gear, RPM, balancing at RPM, instant revs, as this thing could, as you know yourself, rev instantly from 3 to 8,000 because it was that snappy, the throttle response on this thing once it was all sorted. I think it's a combination of things. You know, if there was a correct choice in oil pump made to start off with, you more than likely wouldn't have had this problem. As a replacement for an SR20 is the GDIR pump. Why is it better? One, the gear's thicker, it's wider as well. It does give more oil volume and more oil pressure to the engine. That does a couple of things. The first thing is if it's wider, it's going to be stronger. Okay, that's just the way it is. More material. Along with that, there will be a collar that goes on the crankshaft, which is wider again. The design inside of the pump is different. It's been designed to rev higher and harder. So yet we haven't had one of them break at this stage, so we're going to go with that because we know that works.
Jim then removed the rod caps to inspect the big end bearings. The rod caps in cylinder 1 and 2 had changed colour due to heat degradation, and Jim considered them throwaway items. Looking at the big end bearings, you can see the effects of no oil pressure as the bearings were totally hammered. Luckily I shut the car down when I did, or the engine would have ended up looking like this. A whole lot worse.
You're a lucky boy, mate. Crank, that part's okay. While the bearing material's peeling away, it's definitely gone, squashed. Probably, if you had kept going, apart from the oil, lack of oil supply, so if that had just spun a bearing and the oil supply was okay, that would have actually eventually destroyed and gone through the block. So the fact that you turned off when you turned off is pretty decent. Oh yeah. Look at that. Like I said, it was just ready to destroy itself. I reckon that's the closest I've seen them come to go and bang. See the discoloration of the rod around there, as opposed to the colour it used to be. It's got so hot from running dry. If you look at that one there, that's just starting, but the colour of that around there should have been that same colour there. Once you get that sort of heat into a material, there's no way you're going to go back to its strength. It loses its strength, it becomes more elastic, it becomes softer. And especially in a situation with a rod where there's all the load of each piston and the reciprocating mass and so on, it's all on that big end. I'd never take a risk like that. You replace it.
The main caps were then removed to inspect the main bearings, and they were in surprisingly good condition, as was the crankshaft.
Not so bad. See a bit of heat on there?
Yeah.
That's because the crank's turned and the oil pump hasn't. The final part of the disassembly. Okay, that crankshaft initial observation appears to be reusable. Yeah, what'll happen now is that I'm going to completely strip this now. All gallery plugs out, oil squirters out. I'll measure the actual, because you mentioned about the blow, what you thought was blow-by through the catch tank, I'm actually going to check all the bores myself, taper, ovality, all that sort of stuff. Camshafts, head, I mean, if you have a look, for example, there's a typical, if I can just show you, if the head was actually dry for a long time, that cap would have been scored. But I've actually had a look at the caps. I've had a look at the journals on the camshafts. There's no marks at all. That actually had enough oil to live. The plugs were all spot on, even colour through all four of them. That told a story initially that there was obviously no major failure because there wasn't any bits and pieces hanging off the plugs. There was no unevenness in colour, therefore there was no uneven cylinder pressures or fueling or anything like that. It was all looked okay. No detonation for sure. Then once we got to the head, pulled the head off, as you saw yourself, the pistons are all spot on at the top. I mean, initial inspection is like we can reuse the block, we can reuse the head's fine, the crank's fine, the oil pump's not, but it's basically pump and rods as the main components. Rings and bearings, I mean, even if you pulled this motor apart, you'd put rings and bearings in it anyway. You know, like last time when we did the head bolt conversion kit, we didn't need to do all that because there was no need for the motor to be run in, and the bearings were great and everything was good. But now that it's at this level and there's something that has to be done, machine honing the bore, pistons look fine, but I'll pull the rods off, check the gauging pins and all that sort of stuff. But everything looks pretty decent, so I'm pretty happy that we'll have this thing up and running pretty shortly, eh? We're not as bad as you were making out, so I feel a little bit better too.
Our next step from here is to discuss which parts to put in based around what outcomes we want to achieve from the engine. But rest assured, I never replace broken bits with anything but better bits, so stay tuned.